Finding peace at home. Ben sat in his room, staring out the window, as rain tapped softly against the glass. Downstairs, his parents were fighting again. It had become a normal part of life for him. The yelling, the slamming doors, the silence that followed. He hated it. Every time they argued, it felt like their home got a little colder, a little more distant. Ben missed the days when his parents laughed together. He remembered when they would take him to the park, or sit together at dinner, talking about their day. But now, all they seemed to do was fight. He didn't know what had changed, but something was different. They were always angry, and it made him feel like their family was falling apart. One night, the argument was louder than ever. Ben sat on his bed, his hands covering his ears, trying to block out the sound. But no matter how hard he tried, he could still hear their voices. His mom was shouting about money, and his dad was shouting back, saying she didn't understand the pressure he was under. Tears filled Ben's eyes. He didn't understand why his parents couldn't just stop. Why couldn't they be happy again? He missed the way things used to be. The next morning, the house was quiet. His parents didn't speak to each other at breakfast, and the air felt heavy. Ben looked at them both, and with a trembling voice asked, "Why are you always fighting?" His mom's eyes softened as she looked at him, and his dad put down his coffee cup. For a moment there was silence, and then his mom said, "Ben, we're so sorry. We didn't realize how much this was affecting you." Ben felt a lump in his throat. "It's hard when you fight. It makes me feel like everything's wrong." His dad sighed and rubbed his hands over his face. "We've been so caught up in our problems, Ben. We didn't mean to make you feel like this." His mom reached across the table and took his hand. "We're going to do better," she said softly. "We love you, and we want to make things right." From that day, things didn't change overnight, but they began to improve. His parents started talking to each other more calmly. They agreed to go see a counselor to help them work through their problems. Ben wasn't sure what a counselor could do, but if it helped his parents stop fighting, he was all for it. Over the next few weeks, there were still moments of tension, but the house felt a little warmer. His parents were trying, and Ben could see the difference. They smiled more, even laughed sometimes, and they started doing things together as a family again. They weren't perfect, but they were making an effort, and that meant the world to Ben. One Saturday, his parents surprised him by suggesting they go to the zoo. Ben hadn't been to the zoo in years, and for a moment he wondered if they were joking. But when they all got into the car and drove there together, he realized they were serious. As they walked around, looking at the animals, Ben felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: happiness. His parents still had their problems, but they were working through them. And most importantly, they were making sure Ben knew he was loved, even when things weren't perfect. As they walked back to the car after a long day at the zoo, Ben's dad put his arm around him and said, "We're going to keep trying, Ben, for you and for us." Ben smiled up at his dad. "I know," he said, "and I'm happy." For the first time in a long while, Ben felt like his family was whole again. There would still be hard days, but as long as they kept working together, he knew they would be okay. And that was all Ben had ever wanted: peace at home, and a family that, no matter what, always stuck together. As the weeks passed, Ben noticed even more changes at home. His parents didn't just try to avoid fighting. They made time for each other and for him. His mom started coming home from work a little earlier, and his dad wasn't always buried in his phone or laptop after dinner. They played board games together, something they hadn't done since Ben was little, and even went for walks in the evening. One Friday night, they were sitting around the dinner table, laughing about a funny story Ben's mom had told from her day at work. Ben looked around and felt warmth spread through him. The house didn't feel cold anymore, and the tense atmosphere that had once been so common was now a rare occurrence. It felt like they were slowly finding their way back to being a family. But it wasn't all perfect. There were still moments when his parents would argue, sometimes about little things, like what movie to watch, and other times about bigger issues, like bills or work stress. The difference now, though, was that they didn't let those arguments spiral out of control. They talked things through, apologized when they needed to, and reminded each other that they were on the same team. One evening, as they sat in the living room, his mom turned to Ben and said, "We've learned a lot. Sometimes grown-ups don't have everything figured out, even when we try to act like we do." Ben thought about that for a moment. "I guess everyone makes mistakes," he said quietly. "Even parents." His dad chuckled. "Especially parents. But the important thing is that we're learning from them, right?" Ben nodded. He knew things would never be perfect, but he didn't need them to be. What mattered was that his parents cared enough to try. They were listening to him, making changes, and showing him that families could go through hard times and still come out stronger on the other side. One Saturday, as they were driving back from a family picnic at the park, Ben stared out the window, watching the sun dip low on the horizon. His parents were talking softly in the front seat, and the radio played quietly in the background. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ben felt completely content. The worries he used to carry around, about whether his parents would ever stop fighting, about whether his family would fall apart, had started to disappear. As the car pulled into the driveway, Ben's dad turned around and smiled at him. "How about a movie night?" he suggested. Ben grinned. "Sounds perfect." Later that night, as they all snuggled on the couch with bowls of popcorn, Ben realized something important. Families weren't perfect. They fought, made mistakes, and sometimes hurt each other without meaning to. But what made a family strong wasn't avoiding those hard times. It was how they came back from them. His parents had shown him that by working together, they could heal the cracks and make their family whole again. And as the movie played on and his parents sat beside him, laughing together, Ben knew one thing for sure: no matter what happened in the future, they would always have each other.